You can start the recording.
Okay, recording on. Pastor Kok Fai, please.
Okay. Well, I was asked to recall, and when you give such a task to an old man, it's a really pleasant task, but I want to try to keep it within 15 minutes. I joined Newbridge Road Chapel in August of 1980. And I recall...
Kok Fai, you're not on the presentation mode, your PowerPoint is
okay.
on the...
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so
thank you.
I joined 42 years ago in Newbridge Road, and I recall the many evangelistic efforts that we were taking since 1980 in Newbridge Road and entering PPH in 82 and onwards to the 90s. We do things like tracting, which actually was a very wasteful kind of thing, because the moment you turn your back, you turn back and you see that the tracks are thrown all over the floor. We do street evangelism, what I would call ambush street evangelism, just see any old stranger, and then we go and share the 4 spiritual laws with them. Again, not very active because there's no relationship. It's hit and run. And then after that, we say we are persecuted for Christ's sake. I think that's quite crazy. Then we had this 7 bus stop strategy from PPH. And in PPH, they're all condominiums and landed property, and also not very effective because we were denied entry into the condos. And even if we enter, we only get to meet the domestic helpers and the owners won't even come out. So there is a case to be made for a church-wide corporate evangelistic effort to the heartlands, to that 80+% of Singaporeans who live in HDB flats. And these are the people we must reach, not by tracking, not by ambushing, but by a concerted long-term loving you into the kingdom approach. I love you so much that I have a right to tell you about the God I believe. Let's take a look at some data. This is about percentage of Christians in different dwelling types. And this is 2020 data, very recent. So for those who live in 1-room, 2-room, and 3-room flats, 13.2% of them are Christians. The large majority are not Christians. And we all know that 18.9% of Singaporeans are Christians. So Christians here, we include Catholic and other Christians, which is how the government defines it. Catholic, other Christians. 4-room flats, 13.7, still below national average. And 5-room flat is where we start to creep up. There are more Christians living in 5-room and executive flats than the national average. Then you come to condo, 30%. You come to landed property, 35%, heavily Christian. What is it like for PPH? Okay, I think this data is quite interesting. This is very recent data. So nationally, it used to be some 87% of Singaporeans live in HDB flats, but in 2021, there are only now 78.6% living in HDB flats. For PPH, 58%. Those living in condos, national average 16.5%, PPH 22%. Now you come to landed property, nationally 5%, 4.9%. PPH, 4 times the amount, 20%. And if we only reach friends in our own socio-economic strata, then we are missing the heartlands by many, many miles. Many of our friends are in fact overreached. After some 20 years in Teban Gardens, we know how little interactions people in Teban Gardens and those living in HDB flats have with Christians. There's simply not enough Christians in the HDB heartlands, and this is our mission. And so we need to cross boundaries, cross socio-economic boundaries, and become local missionaries. So I searched my files, and there is this document that I wrote in the 23rd of August, 1993. We were, at that time, going to partner with another brethren church, Bukit Panjang Gospel Chapel, in what we call Project Westside. And essentially, we wanted to set up a CSC, a Community Services Center in Taman Jurong. And let me share with you the little bit highlighted in red. What were the objectives? Number 1, to establish a physically identifiable presence where the majority of Singaporeans live. In those days, probably 87%. Even now is just close to 80% in HDB estate. Number two, evangelize through caring for the soul, the mind, and the body, not just preaching the four spiritual laws, through social service, a long-term commitment. And number three, to provide a testimony to Christian unity. In those days, we thought two churches working in unity would show some Christian unity, but even with one church, we show unity by all of us participating, I don't know, 400, 500, 600 of us doing this thing. But soon after this paper was written, I went away to the US, to Boston, to be exact, for a 3-month course, and the project sort of died in the womb. But in the US, I met a man who was my classmate, and he would later be the CEO of HDB, but more about him later. Let me show you the slides that I used, 20 years ago. On a 30th of October 2002, we had a special night service called the Capping Vision Night, Community Adoption and Pastoring. So I'll show you. Okay, so I mentioned this 1993 project website. I met the future CEO of HDB and when I came back from, I was posted to Hong Kong for nearly 4 years. I came back in end of 1999. And then I found that there was a Project Love that was already running. I think a guy called Anthony Ho was running it. So I took it over, or it was given to me. And at the time, what we did was we went to the Ministry of Community Development and Sports, MCDS, now called MCCY. We just say, hey, we are a church, we want to help poor families. And they gave us names. I think these days with PDPA, you won't get that. And that was my first taste of entering a one-room flat, single mothers, double amputee, and all that. And off and on, we've been discussing how do we get into the heartlands and all that. We visited churches to learn from them. We talked about incorporating a legal entity, but nothing happened. And I remember in those days, I talked to one of the cell group leaders and somebody I respect, because a person who put her hand to the task and all that, she just tell me, Kok Fai, PPH is not ready. I was so disappointed that this fervent Christian cell group leader just say, yeah, we're not ready. In 2001, it was Bill Fu. Bill Fu said that we are in an economic crisis. Why don't we set up a PPH help fund to help those who are in need? Within 3 weeks, we raised $77,000. And so in addition to Project Love, we now have the PPH Help Fund. And we were looking after 50 families, 50 families from all over Singapore. And then came the year 2002. In February, the elders, we decided that we got to take some action, but we took a very comfortable action. We went for an elders prayer drive in aircon cars. We drove from the east, Telok Blangah, which is close to PPH, and all the way across west to Clementi, West Coast, and to Teban Gardens, trying to get a sense from God. God, show us, what do we do? Where do we go? At that time also, we first had the idea of 2020. And since then, we've had 2120, we've had 3130, and this year is 4140. And we said, we're not going to throw a gala dinner, okay? The way we celebrate is to bless the community. And then a month later, Living Sanctuary, who's really pioneering in this work of working in the community, had their 5th community penetration, that was a word that they used in those days, seminar. And so 10 of us, leaders and CG leaders, went to join, and then we were like floored by the video testimonies of so many people coming to Christ because of this approach, a long-term commitment physically to several HDB flats. And I also remember, I think maybe it was Xing who said, either then or sometime later, it's like, it'll be a sad day if PPH feels like we cannot learn from other people. And so we did learn. And then you say, aircon car prayer drive, not really the thing. Let's sweat a bit. So now instead of the elders, we got the diaconate, including deacons, in July of 2002 to do a prayer walk. We already had some sense that after the elders' prayer was more like Teban Gardens, but at the time we were still not very sure. So we said, deacons, we need to pray on site for insight altogether, and let's get a sense from God. Is Teban Gardens really the place? And after that, the whole diaconate, we went into a season of prayer for I think a month or maybe several months. And then we say, okay, we've got to get our cell group leaders together. So we got the cell group leaders together and to go for a prayer walk on the 25th of August, 2002. And I still have some pictures of our young ladies and some young men with much more hair and black hair in those days. Finally, on the 5th of September 2002, the diaconate, which was the highest decision-making body in those days, we agreed, yes, we're going to go ahead. We're going to focus on Teban Gardens. And I remember thinking in those days, like, if half of our CG leaders are on board, quite good already, quite good. We really can make something of this. But as it turned out, 100% of our CGs were on board. And who were our CG leaders and leaders in those days? I still have this picture in 2002. Again, you see a lot of black hair and a lot of hair. And then on the 25th of September, something very, what's the word? Providential. We were given this contact of a Pandan Garden, a lady living in Pandan Garden. I remember her name, Florence. And what happened was that she was in real difficulty. Her husband suddenly disappeared. Months and months and months, they couldn't find the husband who went to Vietnam on business. And the HDB, they couldn't pay their HDB, monthly payments. And the HDB were going to take over the flat, take back the flat and evict them. So when I heard this, I remember visiting her with Mary Chang, and the husband had CPF money, but because he's missing, they cannot touch the money. So I wrote to the HDB. I have my friend, CEO of HDB. I wrote to Tan Cheng Bok, the MP, didn't know him from Adam, he doesn't know me. Anyway, I wrote to him. And then on the 2nd of October, we also met with the CEO of St. Luke to explore the concept of what was called parish nursing, community nursing. And then we got this idea. I also went to visit Health Promotion Board, who later gave us a support letter for us starting this work. And there we have Alice, our Alice Lee, who was a nurse, a diabetic educator, nurse, and she was very excited about this idea of parish nursing. And on the 4th of October, we finally met the MP, Tan Cheng Bok. I wrote to him, this is the email, and he agreed to meet on the 11th of October. I still remember that meeting. He was introduced by Jen, who's the wife of Roger Sim, because we didn't know Cheng Bok, but she knew him. Jen at the time was new to PPH. So I went into this meeting, and then when Tan Cheng Bok came in, we stood up, and then we sat down again. Before my buttock could hit the seat, Tan Cheng Bok said, your church people, the mosque comes and support me in my activities. The temples support me and they're involved in the community. But you churches are always inside your church. You don't support the community. You're not a part of the community. My jaw just dropped. The meeting has not even started yet and I got scolded. Then I was able to say, remember, Mr. Tan, I wrote to you about this lady from Pandan Garden and I'm asking for your help. We have Project Love. We have the Help Fund, and a little bit of credibility managed to salvage. And then he was kind of like, he really bent over backwards to help us. And so we applied to become a society, to form an entity, the PPH Community Services Center. We applied on the 8th of October. A lot of faith, because we had already planned a door-to-door knocking, what we call tapping, on the 2nd of November. And then we said to ourselves in the leadership, we're not going to call anybody, even though we have friends in high places, we're not going to call them, we're just going to pray. And on the 29th of October, we received approval that yes, PPH CSC is now a society, approved, go ahead. Record time, 21 days from our application to approval. Just 3 days, ahead of our first activity, which is the capping. So I want to show you this stuff in green. This is the providential part, right? 10 years before 2002, before PPH CSC was formed, God was like preparing us to help this Pandan Garden lady, Florence. 10 years ahead of that, I got to know the deputy CEO, later on became CEO of HDB, and he helped this Florence, and he also actively helped us to secure Block 44 void deck. 3 years before 2002, God led people, I think Anthony Ho, to initiate Project Love with MCDS. God led Bill Fu to initiate or suggest the idea of the PPH Help Fund before we met the MP, so that when we met the MP, even though these are very, very small projects, we had some credibility. And I think that God in 1993 and even 1999 were thinking that you guys, PPH, you're not ready. So maybe the cell group leader was right. We're not ready yet until his timing. And so finally, on the 30th of October 2002, we had what we call a CAP Vision Night. And this was a slide I used. 6 days before, I went to the tallest building in Teban Gardens and I took this picture. And on that night, we presented the vision to the church. And 3 days later, we went for our first capping. I tell you, I look at the schedule now, it just take my breath away. I think in those days, we really chiong. If today we say, do this, 3 days later, 2 weeks later, we're going to do all this, maybe we might not be so keen. But just 3 days after a special nighttime service on presenting the vision, we had our first capping. And this 2nd of November, you can see everybody in uniform. Okay, we always talk about unity, but not uniformity. No. I think unity plus uniformity is even better. It really showed the church united going out. And on that night, we hit door to door. And you can see some young faces there, Richard and his family, and Celine, and I think that's Matt, right? And our Pastor Kevin and his son, Sean. 2 weeks later, okay, 2 weeks later, we had our first large-scale community event. It was a health screening. And it's sort of like, finally, we know. That's why God bless PPH, a very small church with so many doctors and so many nurses. At the same time, the CEO of SATA was a fairly new member in PPH. And so he was able to arrange everything. And our health screening even included X-ray, because the big bus with the X-ray equipment came and our doctors were there. I always remember one young man, okay, I think he's Raphael, beautiful son. He was just talking to this resident, you know, like interpreting the blood pressure and all that. I mean, he was at that time maybe 16, 17 years old, and he spoke in Mandarin. He said, "Oh, yeah, 这个没有生命危险." I said, "You're really overstepping your boundary. How can you pronounce that? You know, there's no danger to life and limb and all that." But it was just so fun. And so people started coming to church as soon as we hit the community, and then later on, we bussed them in, and we knew that we needed to have a Chinese service. At that time, we only had English services because the language of the people were in Mandarin and in dialect. And then I heard that one of our fellow brethren church, Bethesda Frankel Estate, had many Chinese pastors. So just call up and say, "Hey, can we come and discuss with you? I heard you have many Chinese pastors. Perhaps you can give us one." So I remember Elder Benny and we went to have lunch with them. They even paid for the lunch. Okay, it was a box lunch. Just a short discussion and say, "Oh, we'll give you Pastor Chen Guang." And so we had our first Chinese pastor able to minister to those from the community quite immediately. Alice Lee joined us. At that time, we had no center. She just walked the ground. Okay, her only rest stop is to go to a coffee shop for a drink. And after a couple of months, she was dark as can be because of exposure to sun and reflected sunlight from the roads and all that. And that's how we started. We ministered from cradle to grave. Okay, we blessed the children. We've seen births. We've conducted funerals. And I remember Mr. Chan Ju Chuan funeral. We led him to Christ, baptized him, And he went to heaven wearing my jacket and my tie because his son said, oh, you know how nice, my father in his whole life never wore a jacket and a tie, but maybe I like him to wear a jacket and tie in the coffin. So I give him my jacket, give him my tie. So far, we haven't really done a wedding. We have one wedding. Dr. Raj and Dr. Lois got married in PPH, and then they went to Teban Gardens to live there. But not quite the same. I'm looking forward to the first wedding of a couple that we led to Christ in Teban Gardens, and then we conduct a wedding for them, but hasn't quite happened. And we literally save lives, physical and spiritual. I remember Alice and I, we went to visit this man. The daughter was panicking. Daughter was educationally subnormal, but managed to call Alice. And we saw the man in hypoglycemic shock. He was just lying there and in shock. And Alice said, hey, let's get some sugar. So searched her kitchen, no sugar. Went across to the neighbor and said, can we have some sugar? It's an emergency. So Alice took her finger, put in the sugar, and just stuffed his mouth, and just to give him some sugar. And I believe we saved his life. And of course, many went to heaven. This is, I think, our first CG in TG. Apart from the man in the middle in green, everyone else has gone to heaven. Okay, we're very glad that they've gone to heaven. But the man here in the middle is still in a nursing home. Poor thing, nobody, a lot of restrictions on visiting. And in 2003, 1 year after we registered our CSC in, is it October or November, we started to build, and we applied to the government, and they gave us this $20,000. I think this is the first time I'm showing a picture of this check. I've kept a picture so long, and so good to receive money from Caesar, right? Usually we give money to Caesar. And so we built our center in block 44. Let me end with this. To recap, I recall the fear we had in starting to go door to door. So we even got an elder from Living Sanctuary to come and talk to us about it. We had, in fact, we taped his thing and we created a manual on how to go door to door. But it turned out that it's not as dangerous and not as fearful as can be. There is this picture of my beautiful wife with the sign danger that I like to show. It is not dangerous. The community is not telling us keep out. The community welcomes us. And it's not so much fear, but it's awe. Because we were united in purpose. You see that army of PPH people wearing the same t-shirt, going out there to bless the community. And a lot of people say, yeah, I don't speak Hokkien, I'm not very good at knocking doors and all that. But no, it's complementing one another, right? So you're good at speaking Malay, you can speak Hokkien, you go. I'll be behind the scene, I'll carry the bags, and I will compliment you. And I remember I even borrowed children, because in the early days, people don't recognize us, they don't know who we are when we knock on the doors. And I can't remember, maybe it was Beng Chai, I said, can I borrow your son? So that we go knock on doors, we see children, and they just are so cute, they will open the doors, and we'll begin to make friends with them. And it's really awesome. So when people look at us, PPH Church, PPH CSC, and what we do, they not so much fear us. I think they jaw might drop a bit. So, wow, this is so awesome. It's so awesome that you guys do funerals for free. I remember one person talking to me, your pastors do funerals, you don't even ask for ang pao, nothing, it's free. It's awesome that our ladies will stay with a woman, a widow, laboring in the labor ward, and our sisters will sit together with her, co-laboring as it were. It's awesome that we can get a washing machine for a poor family whose machine died, and so quickly, snap, and we buy it the next day for them. It's awesome that we can install window grills and kitchen cabinets again for another poor family, whereas if they go to the government, it will take months and months of processing and filling this form and checking this and checking that. It's awesome that we can recover $1,500 from someone, a non-believing couple who was scammed. This door-to-door salesman went and sold this couple, old couple, no children, vacuum cleaner for $1,500. And when we found out they were not believers yet at that time, we said, we're going to recover this from you. So we went to the company, we make a lot of noise, and then we recovered the money. And it's so awesome that community leaders tell me, and I've heard it from them, that they will not dare to do anything, any events in the community, if they know that our PPH is holding an event there, because nobody will go to their event. Everybody will come to our event. So the awesomeness of this, I think when people see our passion, our compassion, our selflessness, and above all, unity. Okay, it's great also to have uniformity, but this is how we came to be. And then I think Ross is going to share some other things with you. And I just want to transfer, if I can, that passion for this mission. Okay, that's it.
Okay, next is Ross.
Kevin, you want to stop recording, Eddie?
Oh, yes.
Oh, thanks.
Oops. That's my recording. Okay.